Good afternoon, folks. It's 3 o'clock, Monday, December 12th, 2022, and therefore I will call this meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust Fund to order. I'd ask members to introduce themselves. On my left, Judith.
Judith Underwood.
On my right.
Lawrence Brophy, member.
Brendan Lowney.
And Joe Powers, Town Administrator, as Chair. Thanks, folks. First item under new business is one of the best items we could have under new business. I promised my colleague that I would not have her do a lot of public speaking, but we have to welcome, and please join me in welcoming, to my far left, Brianna Nickerson, who is the town of Harwich's first housing advocate. And so first, I would ask you to join me in a round of applause, because Brianna, you have no idea how long we've been waiting. And so Brianna, welcome. And we're going to talk in a moment, but you do have a moment to say whatever you'd like, however briefly you'd like to.
But, Mr. Chairman, isn't it traditional that the new member gets to speak for 15 minutes minimum?
I thought it was 25.
I'm not sure about that.
So the good news is she's not a member of the trust. She is a staff resource. And I'm going to give you a quick moment, and timing couldn't be better. I'm also going to recognize our brand new, who just walked in and didn't know I was going to do this, Director of Planning and Community Development, Paul Halkiotis. So Paul, thank you. So folks here on the trust and those in the audience, we have two critical roles filled. And so Brianna, the floor is still yours.
All right, thanks, Joe. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited, and I'm from Harwich. I've lived here my whole life, so it's a good role to be in to help the town. So thanks for having me.
Excellent. Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
And for the trust members' benefit, if you didn't see my presentation to the Board of Selectmen when they affirmed the appointment of Brianna, Brianna joins us immediately from the Housing Assistance Corporation. So if I couldn't steal from a town, I stole from one of the better organizations dedicated to housing on Cape Cod. And with all joking aside, it's great to have Brianna join us from HAC, because we know that she knows their mission, and I think she's going to be a great liaison, so to speak, between Town of Harwich and the Housing Assistance Corporation, the Community Development Program, I think that's what our partnership, and any other groups that are dedicated to housing. And so it's great to have Brianna join us with a strong background in housing that she has. That leads me to new business item number 2, and I do see at least one chair of a committee. So we have Elaine Shovlin, Chair of Real Estate and Open Space, and I've already mentioned to Elaine that I have directed Brianna to reach out to all the chairs of any of our committees that support anything to do with housing. And so Brianna will be reaching out to the Chair of Real Estate and Open Space, to the Chair of the Housing Committee, to the Housing Authority, to Community Preservation Committee and Finance Committee, and that's her role. And I also want to emphasize that even though the 4 of us, with Member Howell unable to join us, we are the Board of Trustees of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And as we've talked about our purpose, we have a specific scope. Brianna has no such scope. Her job is to advocate for any and all matters relative to housing. And so as we move forward, Brianna will be here as a resource for the Board of Trustees. I expect Mr. Halkiotis to join us many times because our Director of Planning and Community Development is going to be a great resource when we talk about the various lands that we have and things that we can do with that. So one of those great days that I want everyone to just revel in.
Happy Monday.
Amen to that. Happy Monday afternoon indeed. All right, then moving on under old business. The first item from old business is a carryover from our last meeting. Now, on discussion and possible vote on the development of requests for proposals for the Marceline property, also known as properties adjacent to Pleasant Lake Avenue. In my notes, I had it that any trust member that had thoughts was going to reach out to me. Again, at our meeting on November 28th, we started talking about whether we were going to do an RFP to seek development of that property for the benefit of low and moderate income housing, or if we were going to contemplate sale of that property for the proceeds to benefit low and moderate income housing. I haven't heard from anybody, so I wanted to just open that back up for discussion, and let's get back into the RFP for the Marceline properties, aka Pleasant Lake Avenue adjacent.
Do you have a draft that you want us to be working from, Joe?
Well, my recollection at our last meeting is board members were gonna give me some thoughts on which RFP we wanted to do. I know you shared RFP that you folks had worked with in years past at Mass Housing Partnership.
For the system?
But I think the central question still needs to be determined by this Board of Trustees, and that is, what do we want to do with that land, and what purpose do we want to have it serve?
I think we voted last time that we were not going to sell it, didn't we?
No, there were no votes taken under this discussion point, and rather that the discussion point was going to continue on today. So perhaps for the benefit of the audience, we all know that we have a joint meeting immediately at 4 o'clock with the Board of Selectmen. And so I know the chairman of the board and some members are interested in having the discussion that we had about the purpose of the trust and how we want to move forward. But, you know, those parcels were purchased with community preservation money. So we know that there is a limitation of 80% of area median income. However, we can't even get to the 80 because of our purpose of trust, which gets to 60% area median income. So the question we have to resolve is, what is the best thing for us to do with those parcels? And then execute the RFP to get that done. Judith?
With all due respect, I think the 60% that you spoke about last meeting, I think that number still needs to get worked out. Other trusts around the Cape are doing up to 100.
So I think what we'd have to
And I
do,
think if the state had changed those numbers, it would have been in the newspaper. I just, before we put anything in writing, I just want to triple check that.
so it's probably better for us to have that discussion at the selectmen level, because that information was conveyed to boards of selectmen, so we can talk about that at 4.
Did you
But-
forward your presentation?
I did, I've shared it's the Mass Selectmen's Association, or the MSA. It is a 6-slide deck that I've shared with the trustees before any meetings. That was several weeks ago after Selectman Anderson and I received that from the MSA. Be that as it may, though, Judith, you had said about other trusts. So, you know, I think what we need to be careful with is, every town that has created a trust has its option to create the trust as they want it to be. The fact remains that the town of Harwich established trust language that limits us to that 60% AMI. There may be other affordable housing trust funds out there, Cape Cod and the Commonwealth, that say something different.
I'm not sure where you're finding the 60%, but I'll look for the slide deck that you sent us.
Sure. Anybody else have any comments on this topic?
Well, from my point of view, Mr. Chairman, we've looked at some options, and some of the options are first to see what we can yield from the land that we have. I suspect the best way that we can do that, and without guessing at it, is to do at least a draft plan of subdivisions to see what we'll yield from the land, and what type of zoning that we're going to use up there. We have an option available to us if need be, that we can change the zoning, and that's probably one of the options that we should look at. Having said that, to make whatever AMI we have to make, we've got to kind of look and see what the land is like. So I think before we decide whether we'd like to dispose of the land and use the proceeds for some other option, we should look at the options that we have for that piece of land, which is likely as not retain a surveyor and get some work done on a draft plan of subdivision to see what the yield could be. Then we can put numbers to the piece of land at 13.34 acres. It's a couple of 100,000 square feet, and it depends on the numerator and the denominator.
All right, thank you. Brendan, did you have any comments or thoughts?
I mean, I got a lot going on. I'm just trying to, like, how to unpack it, right? I think getting back to, the trust funds, even using that term today. I think that's something like, we're the Affordable Housing Fund, right? Trust fund. That was important for you to say that. And then also we have to, be on the same page as a board, what low to moderate AMI means. And, the DHCD clarifies it for it. It's also in the declaration that we have here. So I think we should always be focused on 80% or lower. So I think in this RFP, and the thoughts from last meeting was, let's put it out there, let's get developers to the table, because they could do a lot of the heavy lifting for us.
Mhm.
We have a piece of land. I recently had the opportunity to go to the vineyard earlier this week. An RFP just came out for a parcel of 4 acres. And I just received the RFP to look at and review.
Not,
That's-
and not that we would think of plagiarizing it.
No, but I thought it was
I never
interesting.
said that.
I thought it was interesting because that's just a piece of land
Yeah.
and there's no site plan.
Nothing.
There's nothing. So I want to go through that and see, how people are going to come to the table on that, developers. So I don't know if we need to be rushing to spend any money, but I think we have to really get on the same page on these terms, because when we get in front of the Board of Selectmen or people in the audience that are listening, like, we want to make sure we're all on the same page. So I think
And
we
to
have to, so talking above 80% really doesn't even apply to us.
Sure.
The Housing Committee or
Right.
Housing Authority, they can handle stuff.
Yep.
Whether it's buy-down programs or rental assistance, or we can participate. But we have to be shooting for that 80% or lower, period. Based on the legal documents that we have and and just the way everything's set up. From my reading, from the very beginning. The very beginning was, we sit here,
No, but I think
I'm
last
just
time you said
Well, hang on,
40.
yep, if
That's
I,
why.
was that?
I think the last meeting, you said either 40 or 60. I mean, it was very low.
I mean, I combed through that website, the DHCD, to find all the language. It is not easy. That's why no one really knows. It's
Well,
tough to find.
and to that
It's
point,
difficult.
that's why I had said, I think when I distributed to the trust members, were it not for Selectman Anderson receiving an invitation from her association through the MMA, the Mass Selectmen's Association, and her sharing it with me as town administrator, that is the manner in which DHCD chose to distribute their materials on affordable housing presently.
Mhm.
And so they purposely did it through the MMA and the subset of boards of selectmen. And so when I got that slide deck, I had the name of it and I searched for it on their site, and it's not on their site.
Yeah.
And so that's, a function of how a state government wishes to operate.
Mhm.
So we do know, if I may say it this way, we do know that this is presently the thought process of DHCD. Brendan, I want to, build on what you said and what Larry said, and with all due apologies to my new planner who was suggested, hey, why don't you swing by, Paul? I'd like to put you on the spot for a minute if you don't mind coming up to the podium. Now, I'm going to preface this, Paul, by saying that I'm
Well,
relying
you can sit at the
upon.
table if you want.
Yeah, the old
I-
plan used to.
I am relying upon your expertise as a planner, AICP certified and all that, not on your knowledge of Harwich. So I'm going to purposely try to lead you to a question. This trust has land that we've talked about, as you can probably glean together, that was purchased on the private market for the purposes of low and moderate income. Your department, your predecessor, would have been in office when the former chair of this trust went before the planning board with an A&R or approval not required. Now, I'd like to say that I know the answer. I don't. But for the benefit of me and anyone else, could you talk about what A&R means versus a potential draft plan of subdivision generally?
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Be glad to answer that question. So the state calls them approval not required plans, but ironically, they do require the planning board's approval. These plans, there's a few different reasons why these plans are done. One is to create new buildable lots if those lots have the frontage and area requirements and they're on a real paved road. Then you can carve off what we call an A&R lot. And It's a very simple plan that the planning board has 21 days to say yes or no. It can't make conditions of approval. There's no notice in the newspaper. There's no official public hearing. There's no notice to the abutters. They can all go through very quickly before anyone really knows what's going on. So new buildable lots are created using approval not required plans. Approval not required plans are also used to correct a problem, like two neighbors and someone's driveway crosses over the other neighbors and they want to, refinance, or they're going to sell their home and suddenly a surveyor says, hey, there's a problem here, your driveway is on their land. There's a way to do kind of a, adjust the lot lines or do some kind of a land swap, so long as both of those lots, if they comply with zoning, will comply with zoning after that land swap is made. So you can't diminish the frontage to a point where it makes the lot non-conforming, or you couldn't diminish the lot area to make it non-conforming. But if the moving of the lot line doesn't create any non-conformities, they can do it that way. Those are the two main reasons why approval not required plans are done. In contrast to that, the other option is a subdivision. And subdivision involve the creation of new roads. And what most people don't really understand is that the pavement of the road that you usually look at is within a right-of-way. And so a subdivision involves creating a new right-of-way and a new road within it, and all those utilities that are associated with the type of development that's being proposed. And usually nowadays that stuff is all underground. You obviously don't see water and sewer pipes, but usually all the utilities are buried as well within that right-of-way. So the subdivision approval process is a longer process. It's more involved. It requires public hearings, requires notice to the abutters, and notice to the newspaper. And you people are all probably familiar with subdivisions that are currently going on, or you live in a fairly new one or something. So those are the major differences between the two. One is a type of plan that can get approved really quickly, and no one will ever know, until after the fact that it got approved by the planning board, or a subdivision, which is a much longer process, more involved, more notice to the neighborhood about what's going on.
So if I then tell you, and I can say this from firsthand knowledge, the planning board approved the approval not required plan for what's been called the Marceline properties. So as you get into your job, and you and Brianna and I work on these topics, so if you know that there's a plan there, and I tell you that it's approved, what does that mean? And what would you think could be next steps as our planner?
Was the plan ever recorded at the Registry of Deeds?
So I'd have to ask my planner that question. then.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
maybe I can straighten it out. The A&R,
Well, if I may, it's not that I need straightening out.
okay,
I want to involve our planner, because we have not had the benefit of a planner for over 6 months now.
okay,
But I also want Paul to know that there was a process that took place whereby the past chair of this trust presented documents and had our engineer at the time speak to an approval not required. So there is information there. Feel free to take it from there.
having done it from there, there were some difficulties with that title, and that was difficulty with lot lines, and they did an A&R to enable the registration, period.
Okay. So we'll have to follow up to find out whether or not the plan was recorded, because if it wasn't
It was
recorded.
recorded.
It was? All right, so we should be all good. The lot's been officially created and it's recorded.
It simply straightened out the lines. It didn't, it was an A&R, but it was to clean the lines up for registration, period.
Okay. With regard to the topic that you were discussing earlier about the median area income requirement, so DHCD considers at or below 80% of the median income to be low to moderate affordable. The next level down is 60% low moderate, and that's considered low. And so if somebody was submitting a 40B, they would indicate what their intent was, whether this would be low mod at 80% or low at 60%.
Are you familiar with what their standards were for, and I know it doesn't correspond legally to the subsidized housing inventory list, but their standards on workforce housing?
Those-
Workforce housing is another term for affordable housing, and I don't think that it has, I'm looking at Brianna, I don't think it has any legal standing in
No
terms of
standing.
having different regulations.
Sorry, if I want to have the speaker first.
So I've heard the term workforce housing used quite a bit, and oftentimes it's done because people don't like the term affordable housing, but it's intended to, be housing for the working people of the town that can't afford to live in the town.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So for the benefit of everyone listening, I will tell you that the last question I asked falls into that old political axiom of never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. So at 4 o'clock today, when the Board of Selectmen meets jointly with us, they have the Mass Selectmen Association's slide deck. On page 2, DHCD writes that they determine presently low to moderate income housing to be less than 60% of AMI. And thank you, Paul, and I want to emphasize, that was not meant as a setup for you. I wanted to know what you thought of workforce and, workforce. In that same slide deck, they talk about workforce housing and it being at 80, 100, and greater of AMI. And so, again, for our purposes, we have a legal trust document, and it states expressly that our purpose is to preserve and create low and moderate income housing as defined by DHCD. Now, I say that directly because Selectman Anderson and I have had ongoing conversations. She's very much tied into all these presentations. And when we were on that presentation for Mass Selectmen's Association, we were able to ask questions only through the chat function, and I was one of, I think, several people that asked, is DHCD's definition of low and moderate income housing the 60% or less AMI? And the answer was yes. And so that's what we're struggling right now in real time, and I appreciate what Mr. Lowney has said. Anybody that tries to find this on the DHCD website, you won't find it. And so, if I could, that's why, as the leaders of the town, the executive branch, we can only operate with that information. Now, having said that, we have strong connections to the DHCD in that the LIP director, or Local Initiative Program Director, is none other than Ally Sabatino, our former planner. And so she's been a great resource. But I just want to make sure we're all operating on the same understanding. Now, that does not mean that we can't have discussions going forward with DHCD, but it does mean that we cannot talk about workforce housing as we have in meetings past relative to the Marceline properties. Judith?
So my understanding is that that percentage comes out of legislation, so that it's not a policy decision, it's actually a decision made by the legislature. So in other words, DHCD does not make that percentage, they just carry it out per the request of the legislature.
Okay, thank you.
So my understanding is it is 80, not 60.
Again, I can only go off of the public record that DHCD has created, and there's going to be more discussion of that jointly with us and the Board of Selectmen.
And that was from them directly?
That was from the DHCD. I don't have the presenter's name, but we can find it. I think Selectman Anderson, and we have any number of microphones if you want to join us.
It
But,
doesn't show up anywhere. I mean, it's
Yeah.
everything I've read, it's 80.
right, so again, this was a webinar sponsored by Mass Municipal Association,
But
put on by the Division of Housing and Community Development for DHCD to talk to boards of selectmen directly. Judith?
maybe, could you reach out and just confirm it with Ms. Sabatino, if she's working with them?
Yes, so so one of the things that Ms. Nickerson's gonna work on is, working directly with DHCD and any resources we can capture there. The point I've been trying to make for several meetings now is, if you recall our community engagement on affordable housing back on October 4th, the phrase that I heard the most from participants was workforce housing. And so workforce housing is not in that realm that we talked about. And workforce housing is not a directive of this public body. So that as we go forward, our mission is preserving and creating low and moderate income housing. And that's gonna be the next discussion we have with two representatives of folks that have done great work on that. As we move forward, and spoiler alert, one of the things I'll be suggesting to the Board of Selectmen at 4 o'clock is perhaps the board could charge Rios, Housing Committee, Housing Authority, and anybody else to work on matters that relate to workforce housing and anything other than low and moderate, as we get a handle on what low and moderate means for us. Again, low and moderate for us, Community Preservation Committee has been graciously granting, and this is timely because I'm meeting with them this Thursday evening to defend our request for another $500,000 to support our trust purpose. The CPC statutes say that any money that's used from the affordable housing bucket is limited to up to 80% of area median income. So, sorry, thank you. There's a member here that might either confirm or refute. Again, where we're coming from is our trust document says whatever DHCD says it is. CPC has restrictions and we can't go past that. So as we get into our joint meeting at 4 o'clock with the board, I think we need to expand that conversation and to tie it all together. That's why I've charged Ms. Nickerson with reaching out with anybody, any public body of the town of Harwich that deals with housing, so she can be our first point of contact and my liaison to figure all that stuff out. So what is the will of the trust as it relates to development of requests for proposals? As I ask the question, I can offer a short-term solution. We have a brand-new Director of Planning and Community Development, brand new to Harwich, by no means brand new to planning. An excellent resource, as is Ms. Nickerson, so perhaps I will tell you that I'll meet with my team and staff and we'll work on that and be able to give some reports back to the trust at our next meeting.
Where's the RFP going? That's the question. Are we gonna, there's gotta be a target.
So I heard you say before that we'd want to know what the yield was, and we may need to have a draft plan of subdivision.
Correct.
So that would be the kind of conversations that I have with my planner, and let him familiarize himself with the file, let Ms. Nickerson familiarize herself with that project, and start using these fantastic resources to come to bear for the trust.
I think it'd be great to put on the agenda for next meeting as well,
Yeah.
to get input from Brianna and Paul.
Excellent.
That'd be great.
All right. Next item on old business. Now, this is only old business because I mentioned it to the trustees at our last meeting. And I'm eternally grateful that we have representatives of both of the properties that are listed. So this is now old business item B, discussion on preservation of affordable housing. So by way of introduction, you can see the letters that I wrote on behalf of the town, because the subsidized housing inventory, or SHI list, is not just a function of the trust, it's a function of the town. And as we know, we've been talking about our SHI list for the town of Harwich. There are 5.4% of our total units, or 327 units that appear on the SHI list. And the SHI list, Paul, I'm gonna look in your direction, you don't have to come up, you could nod or shake your head in the no, my understanding is the SHI list is updated annually by DHCD after input from each community. Does that sound right? Thank you. And so we expect to receive, in years past as early as this week, the latest SHI list. But we know that the SHI list for 2023 could see 49 units coming off of the SHI list. Now, the 49 units that may come off the SHI list are simply a function of, there were two the developments, I think is the right way to say it, that the town of Harwich had constructed through private enterprise over the last, I think it's 23 years. There may have been an extension on the restriction because of COVID, but in any event, there are two developments in town where their units are scheduled to come off of the subsidized housing inventory list next year. And so, working with Ms. Ally Sabatino at DHCD, what DHCD has simply said is if you are familiar with a development that has an affordable restriction setting to expire, the town may have conversations with the owners, but the owners are fully within their rights to say, thank you, no. So I have invited representatives from renovated 333 Main Street LLC and representatives from, I know, I said it was Mid-Cape Church
Oak Village.
Homes, but is it really Pine Oaks LLC?
Yeah.
Mid-Cape Church Homes Incorporated.
Thank you, all right. So first, if, Jamie, if you're willing to come forward. So first, we have Jamie Vieira. I believe he is the chief strategist, or some other title I'll make up. But Jamie is here on behalf of DeWitt Davenport and Davenport Realty. They own and manage the 11 units at 333 Route 28. By way of geography, that's directly across from the Harwich Port House of Pizza. They have 11 units, 3 of which had restrictions. As I've learned through the 40B process here recently, the discussions on Chloe's Path, their 11 units, because there are 3 that are affordable, allow the town to have all 11 units credited to us, even though 3 have the affordable restriction. I've asked, Mr. DeWitt, Mr. Davenport was good enough to put Mr. Vieira in contact with me, and Jamie and I have worked on other matters before. I just want to make it clear that this is what may be hopefully the first of several conversations, because again, if these units come off of the shy list, that's a town of Harwich problem, but it is not a problem that was created by either of these property owners. They worked their process appropriately. They honored and met their obligations on the affordable restrictions. Rather, this is a chance to see if there's any way that the Board of Trustees could entice these owners, and if there's anything we could do to partner with them to see if we can continue those affordability restrictions. So with that, Mr. Vieira, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Up to and including correcting the fake title I may have given you.
That's a good one. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to Harwich. Well, you're rolling Harwich. Jamie Vieira, I'm Vice President and Chief of Staff of the Davenport Companies. I'm here on behalf of Renovated 333 Main Street LLC, as Mr. Powers indicated. In response to the letter that was sent, I reached out to him last week to provide some information and to advise the position of our company with respect to the regulatory agreement and the comprehensive permit that is set to expire in July of 2023. A little bit of some background. In 2000, the Zoning Board of Appeals approved the comprehensive permit. The structure, if you're familiar with it, was a retail establishment of multiple storefronts that we attempted to convert to residential housing after 2 unsuccessful attempts at the zoning board to just renovate and utilize the 11 units. We then went the 40B route. Same, but it's the same, okay? Different statutory process to get to the same result. That required 3 of the 11 units to have affordability restriction to 80%, and we have maintained that throughout the 20-year period of time. I did inform Mr. Powers that at present, our intention would be to let that expire, but I am willing to listen, as I indicated before, and I want to give you a little bit of some information to explain that if it does expire, we're not talking about a real tectonic shift potentially in rents. We have 3 affordable units that at present are rented at $1,660 a month, $1,660 a month, and $1,560 a month. There are 11 units. When you add in those rentals with our other so-called market rate, our average monthly rental for 11 units is $1,681. So our market rate is right in line with what is the affordable rate. And I say affordable, that's the capital A affordable. We like to consider these units what I call small a affordable. That is, given the nature of where they're located, given the size of what they are, given the person that you want to have reside there, to have the means to be able to stay long-term, you make the rental appropriate for what someone can afford to pay without restrictions and percentages and all of those things, and that's what we've done at this property. And that's essentially what we intend to do with the property, with or without the restriction extension. It's a model that works. Of the 3 individuals who are residing in what I call the Capital A Affordable, one has been there since 2008, one since 2010, and the other since 2013. So we have a long-standing relationship with folks that are living at the property. We have no intention, come July, on August 1st, sending out rent doubling initiatives, because it's market rate now. The market's just not going to produce that type of result. So the long story short is, as it stands, our intention is to allow the restriction to expire. There's a lot that goes into it. Every year there's an audit, and every year there's an expense that we have to pay. And it's not about the expense, it's just one more thing you gotta do with time and money to operate the property. But as I indicated to Mr. Powers, if there's something that we can do with the trust to make sure that we maintain and the town maintains the ability to say that there are affordable units at that place, I'm happy to have that discussion. I don't know what it would lead to, and I don't know what we can work out, but I'm happy to have those continuing discussions with the trust going forward. But I want to be clear, as it stands right now, that's what our position is. And again, I don't think it's earth-shattering in terms of rental, given the history of how we've operated that property.
Thank you, Mr. Vieira. Any questions or comments from the trustees? Mr. Brophy?
It doesn't seem like too much has changed over 20 years, does it? And if I remember correctly, I was on the planning board when we did this.
Yeah,
And it seems to have worked the way you told us it would work a good many years ago. So I have no difficulty with you continuing forward. What we would like to do is get credit for it, as you can well imagine, because the credit is critical to the town. And even though it's only a few units, that percentage is more than useful to us. So we'd love to work with you on anything we can do to make it work.
And as I've said here, and I said to Mr. Powers, I'm happy to have those discussions.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Lowney?
I think Larry summed it up. I mean, I feel the same way about it, so whatever we can do to keep the conversation going.
It's amazing what $1,600 is affordable now, huh? Judith? did you have any-
Initially, when this was approved, the restriction was $600 a month.
Want to see the affordability in Boston.
Well, thanks.
Judith, any comments or questions?
No, I know Mr. Davenport's been very generous with all the communities on the Cape. I think from the renters, Larry's expressed, the opportunity for the town. And I think from someone who's rented for most of her life, I know if somebody's in that financial position, I think they rest easier if they were to know that this was in place. So anything we can do, is the audit done do you need to bring in an outside person? I mean, is that something maybe we can help
It's not a
with?
lot of money. It's a lot, it's actually more of our own internal time that has to be utilized, and the gathering up of documentation that has to then be processed, audited, reviewed to ensure that you're maintaining that 80% AMI. It's not a huge financial burden, but it's something that we have to do that, for 20 years, it'd be nice to not have to do it. But again, I'm willing to have discussions about what, if anything, we can do going forward, and see if there's a fair balance that works for the town and works for us.
Joe?
Judith, all set?
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Brophy?
I think you hit it right on the head. We have 2 brand-new employees that are more than willing to work with you, and our housing advocate will be happy to work.
Not hard to find.
Thank you.
And for me, again, I want to reiterate, the purpose for bringing this to the Board of Trustees' attention is because we want to do this in the light of day and make everybody aware. And now, I can work through staff, I can work through council to continue the conversation on behalf of the town, and then come back to the trust on future meetings. But I appreciate Mr. Vieira joining us today, because again, what we're struggling with on the town side is not because of these folks that have graciously come here today. Rather, it's to see if we can strike something that's in a mutual best interest of all parties. And I appreciate your attendance and your forthrightness.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then next up would be Mr. Gregory Winston, I believe, and you're more than welcome to bring anyone else with you on behalf of Mid-Cape Church Homes. As they come forward, you will know that according to our records, there are 38 units at what we know to be 61 John Nelson Way, Pine Oaks 2. And again, same situation where those units would be coming off of the shy list, so Department of Housing and Community Development says, send them a nice letter and ask them to come in and talk, and that's what we've done. And again, I thank you for your willingness to come in and have that conversation. Again, to help us, a problem that you didn't create, but we're trying to solve. And if you could just identify yourselves for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Gregory Winston. I'm President Chairman of the Board of Mid-Cape Church Homes, soon to be known as Pine Oaks Village Homes, but right now it's Mid-Cape Church Homes. The question that you have for us today is relative to our village number 2 with 33 units of affordable housing. Our project started in the early 70s with Pine Oaks 1, which was developed under guidelines of rural development. Our second property, Pine Oaks 2, guidelines deal with rural development and HUD. And then our third is a combination of the two as well. Right now,
Greg, if I could, just for the record, if your colleague could identify.
yeah, I'm
himself.
sorry, Forrest Alvin Eaton.
Al Eaton,
Al Eaton, thank you. And your role
also a
in that?
member of the board.
Thank you very much. And the floor is yours, Greg.
No, that's fine. So basically what I understand is that you're trying to update your inventory of affordable housing. Mid-Cape Church Homes, Pine Oaks Villages, from the very beginning, our goal was to provide affordable housing, and in phases 1, 2, and 3, one starting in the late 70s, all affordable for the elderly. 2, mid-80s, 84, affordable for handicapped and elderly, and Pine Oaks 3, which is late 80s, early 90s, affordable once again for the elderly. Right now, I did a little investigating as to the 33 units that you're questioning right now. That's Pine Oaks 2, and we are about 30 years after post-development, and we have consistently kept it as affordable. And it's not our intention to change, but we are reviewing our guidelines and so forth and so on. We have some flexibility. Clearly, we want to work with the community, and we want to work with the Housing Trust to continue what we've been doing up to this point. Right now, Mid-Cape Church Homes / Pine Oaks Village Homes provides about 50% of the what the town needs toward affordable housing. So it is, we're very interested in continuing with that. But at this point in time, I'm doing a little more research, as of the date I received your letter, actually, to find out what kind of flexibility we have. Mm-hmm. Having listened to your last meeting and then listening to what you've had to say earlier today during this meeting, we're all understanding that 60% median is a little bit low, and it's actually seriously low. We need to be up around 80 to 100 and maybe 125 in order to take care of the people that take care of us. And so we're exploring all the options. And that's what we're doing right now. So we're open to any suggestions that you people may have, and we would like to help you in any way we can. We have a great board, and we have a very enthusiastic group of people who are working with us. We've done, let's say, our due diligence as far as moving forward. We had an opportunity to work with the town of Brewster on the Millstone Road RFP. We did a lot of work. I can say a great deal of work, and working with a number of professionals to try to get a bid in to develop and answer that RFP. Unfortunately, our time was a little constricted And we were dealing with a situation with topography over in Brewster where there were hills and rocks and so forth and so on. And by the time we got our group together and we got the final answer, we came in with our unit price about $50,000 higher than where we wanted to be. So unfortunately, we didn't get that RFP, but we've learned so much from it that we're ready to go and move on to the next.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Winston. Mr. Eaton, do you want to add anything?
Just to summarize that, it is, to follow up what Greg has already said, the board has expanded the mission of the organization. To this point in time, historically, we've devoted our attention to the low and moderate income, seniors and handicapped. But the board has changed it, expanded its mission to include all affordable housing. And for the time I've been on the board, the short time that it's been, absent COVID, we have been interested in working with the surrounding towns in developing affordable housing. There's a need, we're aware of it, everybody's aware of it. We want to find a solution, so that's what we're looking for.
Thank you very much, and thank you again, both for showing up today. I'll open it up to the Board of Trustees for any comments or questions.
Brendan?
Mr. Lowney?
Yeah, thank you for coming, and it goes back to exactly the last presentation. Definitely looking to continue the conversation, where we can do to participate and continue. That'd be great, and future stuff as well. I know you're thinking about something, so.
And
Mr. Brophy?
And I think, Greg, that I would simply reiterate what I said before, that, anything we can do to ease the process would be, as a board, we're more than willing, and I suspect that our 2 new employees that don't have heavy workloads yet are more than willing to volunteer.
Yet.
Get in the early stages.
I truthfully believe that as a group, as our organization and your board, we can overcome some of the obstacles that are in the way here. And clearly, the DHCD 60% requirement is extremely low, and it's not helping us in any way to take care of the people who we really want to take care of. So it's our goal to try to negotiate that upward.
Sure.
And you might be interested to know that none of the homes that we provide at MCCH Pine Oaks Villages are under the auspices. In other words, we are under the guidelines of affordable, all adjustable according to income for the individuals who reside there. But once again, I can't be strong enough when I say that the DHCD must consider increasing that 60%, because we cannot move forward and accomplish what our goal is to accomplish, is to provide housing for the people who work in our communities. And I say communities because we are overall not just Harwich, but it's Harwich, Brewster, Dennis, Yarmouth, Chatham, particularly Chatham, Dennis, Brewster, and Harwich. So I really think that we need to study this. I think one of the things I've listened to here from planning as we move forward, I'm going to be very interested in the restrictions not required as far as development goes. And what I heard, I believe, is talking about single parcels as opposed to developments where you have to lay out streets, even if these streets are on ancient ways. I think that's kind of interesting. I'd be interested to work with our new town planner and get more information about that.
Thank you. Judith, any comments or questions?
Yeah, I think just, take Paul's remarks, and he, this is his, first day? I'm not sure. So just getting back to the question about the 33 units.
Well, I think our records have it as 38.
38. I think
Okay.
I used the number I had.
38.
It's 38. And it's,
And these expired July 1st?
And I meant to say thank you to Mr. Viera. Our town records did not have a date of expiration, so for Jamie to let us know that the 333 Main Street was July was helpful. We don't know when your restriction would come up, and DHCD wasn't sure either.
it wasn't printed
Yeah, we're looking into that right now and
Okay.
just getting confirmation about the specific dates and timing.
So my concern is for the tenants that are in there now. And I would love to, I think all of us would love to kind of find some solutions so that they can stay put, irregardless of, you know, their income, if it's, in other words, I wouldn't want them to be displaced for somebody that all of a sudden comes in at 100 or 120. You understand what I'm saying? So, yeah, whatever, yeah. I don't know if you have.
Let's put it this way, we have absolutely no intentions of moving any of our residents. We have to recertify our residents every 3 years. We have to balance their income against our requirements. Many of our requirements, of course, because of our financing, are federally mandated requirements, so we have to be in accordance with that. But no one's going to be put in the street, believe me.
I had to ask, because nobody had brought
No.
it up. And then the other question, I don't know if anybody can answer this now, but when did these agreements get renegotiated for periods of time, or is it every year it gets revisited? Is there any
So,
kind of standard?
so generally speaking, well, I'll say it, the property owners and managers are in the catbird seat. It's their sole decision as to whether or not they want to have any discussions. And so, again, thank you, gentlemen, and as with you, I will say that I will work with my team and council to see what solutions or offers we may be able to come up with and follow up with you. But at this point, Judith, they've met their obligations under their permits, and unless we come up with an agreement, they do not have to extend them.
No, I understand that. I'm just asking
Yep.
if there's a norm
So,
to look to.
according to DHCD, it's whatever the parties can agree to.
Okay.
So I think it behooves the town of Harwich, whether through the Board of Selectmen, the trust, all of the parties, to try to come up with a solution. If that's the way to go, we may find that there is really no way to come to agreement, and it's, for me, for lack of a better word, it's the natural expiration. It just then puts more pressure on the town, because our subsidized housing inventory list is decreasing rather than increasing, and we do not have a lot of units that are contemplated in the, say, next 3 to 5 years. And again, as I've said to Mr. Vieira, I'll say to you folks, thank you for coming in and being part of a conversation of a problem that you didn't create, but we have to solve. But, thank you.
I think
Mr.
what-
Halkiotis, did you want to offer something, or? You could just come to the microphone.
I'd like to respond to the question about the term of the deed restrictions. Years back, they were pretty standard to be 30-year deed restrictions. More recently, 10 or 15 years, DHCD has been pushing communities to get permanent deed restrictions, so that this, in this case of what we're talking about this afternoon, hopefully a renegotiation to extend the affordable deed restriction. So 30 years was kind of the standard, then it's kind of gone to permanent, but that's a negotiated thing that usually takes place during the permitting process, or when those affordable units are being established.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Gentlemen, again, thank you for your time, and
Thank you.
of
Thank
course,
you.
we'll be in
Thank
touch. We
you.
Pleasure.
What I would like to suggest to the trustees at this point is, why don't we stand in recess? We can reconvene at 4 PM when we meet jointly with the board. And then I would just look for time at the end for us to talk about our meeting schedule. But in the interest of taking a quick break and setting up the room for the joint meeting, I will say that this board stands in recess until 4 o'clock. Thanks, everybody.
Are you going to have us